We had a workforce that was hungry for opportunities to grow. As we look at this, we call it skill-based learning because we're not spending decades, years around skills taxonomy and identify the top 20 skills per employee, per role. We're really coming in with just this being this mindset and this investment as we evolve and grow this. It's skill-based learning because it's around access to learning and democratizing learning and making it equitable and inclusive, not we're going to spend years really identifying those skills per role. Now, we are doing that through our taxonomy and job architecture, but that's more behind the scenes.
Right.
We really wanted this to be employee facing. What's this mean for me?
Right.
How do I grow my career? And once we get that investment and buy-in and people really creating their own motivation to learn, we'll be layering in the more complexity, getting down to that role-based learning.
Phil, thanks for joining today. I'm really excited to get to talk to you after having chatted a little bit about the work you're doing on skills transformation at Phillips 66. So appreciate you taking the time.
No, thank you, Vince. I'm excited to be here and catch up with you again.
Yeah. Well, let's dive right in. There's a lot of talk in the industry around skills transformations. Different organizations are taking it in different ways. So maybe we can sort of start by defining what is skills-based learning? What is the transformation you're leading at your company right now?
Sure. So a little context, if you start looking at the demographics across the United States, less young adults are coming out of universities with degrees. And if you look at the highly operational or technical space we live in, there's a real opportunity to harness the workforce and really invest in them so that they can grow their careers at your company or at Phillips 66. So I think it's meeting the demographics, the audience, the employee base where they are. And so with that is also an opportunity to, as we grow as a company and become the leading downstream integrated energy provider, we're no longer just sitting in single energy sources. So we're also looking, how do we look at our business as an integrated portfolio? And if you think about that from an employee base, what are the skills needed for you to move across the integrated company and grow your career at Phillips 66? I think there's those external macro factors. And then if you look internal to what our growth strategy is, we really want us to invest in growing our own talent. And part of that is the skills. And we talk about skills being your currency for your future because you own those, you carry those, and it's our role to invest in those and allow you pathways to grow skills that really match your interests, but also match the interests of the business. So that's why we're investing right now. It's really part of our business growth strategy, that integrated strategy I mentioned. And it's also just allowing individuals to grow their careers here at Phillips 66.
Just so I understand, it sounds like, of course, there's a general demographic challenge, as you mentioned, but internally, you have such varied functions within the organization. And for the organization to thrive, you need talent to be able to be mobile across different functions. And in order to do that, you need better defined skills as well as approach to develop skills so people they don't just like be siloed in one area, but they can actually transition to different parts as they see fit.
Exactly. And so we work at like the business unit level, like our IT group, our finance group, right, that have highly specialized workforce. However, we're always looking at the skills of the future and where the organizations. But our largest workforce are college or high school graduates in our operations, in our field operations. For most of those individuals, they weren't raised in an environment where going to university was either encouraged or even on their roadmap, nor there could be an interest. However, that's 2/3, 70% of our workforce. And by harnessing and giving them opportunities to grow skills, you can actually shift them and bring opportunities that could be within a corporate business unit function and be starting a career as an analyst, right, in finance or in IT. They could have started as a mechanic or a welder, and really just looking and, like you said, that mobility and creating those opportunities internally to have individuals really, once again, grow their career with us.
I just love the economic development and sort of career mobility mission of this work. You had described the work and initiative you're leading as skills-based learning. I think that's one term you had used before. Can you define what that means in your mind?
Sure. Well, it starts with really identifying what are those core skills of the organization at the enterprise level, at the business unit level, and then at the role level. We're being real clear right now. We're working at the enterprise level and now at the business unit level. We're not getting to the role. And why we made that decision is, as you can imagine, in the world of skills taxonomy and definitions, we could sit there for decades. And that's not our goal. Our goal is around making a meaningful impact around driving our downstream integrated strategy. And we are fully grasping it's at that skill level. And we had a workforce that was hungry for opportunities to grow. As we look at this, we call it skill-based learning because we're not spending decades, years around skills taxonomy and identify the top 20 skills per employee per role. We're really coming in with just this being this mindset and this investment as we evolve and grow this. And so it's skill-based learning because it's around access to learning and democratizing learning and making it equitable and inclusive, not we're going to spend years really identifying those skills per role. Now, we are doing that through our taxonomy and job architecture, but that's more behind the scenes.
Right.
We really wanted this to be employee facing. What's this mean for me?
Right.
How do I grow my career? And once we get that investment and buy-in and people really creating their own motivation to learn, we'll be layering in the more complexity getting down to that role-based learning. The other thing I would say, Vince, that's interesting is we want to get away from role-based thinking. Many people, not all people, have a view the only way to grow your career is to get a promotion and move into managing and leading people. And that's getting more and more limited. What we want to do is really talk about skills, and attainment of skills is what's really going to give you the opportunities to grow laterally, possibly lead teams, possibly lead cross-functional teams, but maybe never even get into a managerial role. And so how do we shift that mindset around just talent mobility, not just being vertical in that promotion, but being more of a lattice? So that's really embedded into our organizational design. And how do we ensure the workforce really understands what the implications? So that's why we lead with that skill-based learning, not skills as the organizational kind of model.
Got it. Yeah, the emphasis on the learning because it's the practical aspect that's employee facing. It's sort of, I think, what you're saying.
And what they've been asking for.
Right. One question I have is these kind of skills transformations, they take shape in different ways in different organizations, but I think they tend to be pretty massive and multi-year and take a lot of investment, a lot of effort and coordination. So it usually takes organizations quite a bit of time to even commit to doing it. How did this come about as a priority that the business will actually tackle today? Curious if there's like a why now that's prevalent for this.
Twofold. One, there is leadership support. We had a new CEO come in just over 3 years ago, a new executive leadership team, CHRO, who came in over the last 2 to 3 years also with a recognition around the opportunities, say leadership openness. But this really came from our employee base. When we did our employee engagement survey in 2023, and then we did it this past year, the number one thing employees are asking for is opportunities to grow. And how do they grow? Another is around just leadership capability. How do we ensure our leaders have the capability to lead the organization where they are? If you step back and look at that business strategy of integration, you bring in a new leadership team, and then you listen to the employees' number one ask is career growth opportunity. And then if you break that down and you start looking at skills, it just gives you the roadmap to be able to do that versus creating custom-made career development programs or custom-made tracks for someone who's coming into a role. Rather than sit back and really make it very finance-oriented, IT-oriented, early career, mid-career, we were like, no, let's just boil this all down to skill-based learning. And if we invest in our skills and then invest in the technology to allow access, that's just going to elevate and scale and allow us to deploy quickly. We've done all this in less than a year.
Wow.
Right? And we're launching now, and it's not perfect. The other thing too is I think in our space, we want perfection. And what I've learned is that the business is open to, as if we've got it at 60 to 75% baked, they'll allow us to ideate to 100%. Let's not let perfection be the enemy here. Let's just roll something out. And that's why we made that decision to do some enterprise skills, to look at some more business unit skills skills and not get down in the roles, because that's where you just get tied up in years and years of design and development. And then I think the other thing, Vince, that's interesting, and our partner from a technology is open. We're like waterfalling it. We're doing what happens when we launch, what happens 3 months after launch, what happens 3 months after that. So we're really creating this agile environment where we're layering in opportunity for the individuals to really navigate the system and navigate our content. But we're not just open sourcing it, saying anyone can do anything. We're saying, no, first know your top 10 skill. Now go in and start working on your proficiency and development and creating these pathways for learning. Then we're going to layer in, say, top 3 enterprise skills. But we're really managing that from a change perspective to allow the organization and employees to feel comfortable where we are. And our 3-year strategy is really opening it all up and creating a talent marketplace with gig assignments and opportunity to really see other roles that you're interested in those skills and being able to really navigate towards that. So we're being very kind of conscientious of trying to create an agile ideated model versus it's perfect, let's launch it, everything goes. That gets down to why we selected such a few number of skills, because we get in our own way sometimes.
Yeah, you mentioned this need to simplify and decomplexify the work to get stuff done. And that resonated because I think a lot of times the skills work gets so complex that it never takes off because no one can really understand it. There's too many pieces. And by the time you're done with the taxonomy, the skills have changed, right?
Yes.
Could you share with me a little bit, how would you define the way in which you've simplified this work? And what are these skills that you're focused on right now? And how did you choose to narrow down on those, you call them enterprise skills?
Yeah. So let me tell you a funny story, Vince. When I joined here, I started using that word decomplexify. And someone actually said to me, that's not a word, Phil. You've made a word up. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I made a word up. But I think we are making things way more complex than they need to be. That has become a word I use often. We need to decomplexify things, not sit in a skills governance spin or skills taxonomy spin. So really what we did is we went up to that leadership team, our executive leadership team, and said, what are the future skills for 2026 and 2027? We need the organization, each individual, to invest in themselves to enable our business strategy. And we identified those. As you can imagine, one of those is artificial intelligence. How are we leveraging that? How do we have a basic knowledge so that it's not coming over the top of how we're making investment and what technology investments we're making in, but how can we ensure the entire organization is really thinking about that as an enabler? Another is continuous improvement. We are in a model where we're really trying to bring a culture of accountability down to each employee to always be thinking, how can we continuously improve? And this can be in your job, this could be processes, wherever you sit in this role. But you as an employee are an owner of your domain and should be having that lens. So we just kind of landed on those at the enterprise level through our executive leader, and then we vetted those through kind of the organization with some focus groups. And we were able to do that in 3 months. Now, is it perfect? No, but we've got the 3. We're staying focused. We'll probably shift those as we grow and move forward as we ideate. Like I said, next we're going to kind of shift down into more role-based individual, but let's start there so people can get an understanding of what skill-based learning is. And Vince, I don't think anyone can argue with the focus areas. They're things our leaders talk about, and we're now going to give you opportunities to grow and learn in those spaces. And then the other thing I think that's so interesting, Vince, is we had all these disparate platforms or content providers in our space and learning. They were never harnessed together to really source to what Vince is interested in, right? And how Vince likes to learn. It was more of how we like to source it to you. By leveraging a partner and a technology platform, we can bring that all together, leveraging AI, and it soon gets personalized to you with the more interaction you have with the platform from all of our sourced content. It really just builds itself, personalize itself, but allows us to really introduce this at scale, tied to those executive kind of core skills as we need to really grow the future in the next year or two. But our model, as I talk about, is every year we're going to have a core group of skills that we're always going to tackle organizationally, because I think that just continues to lift the organization up to that enterprise view and get you out of just your role. That's how we did it, and did it quickly.
That makes a lot of sense. The discipline to focus when you probably got a whole bunch of different also requests, I think is the key here to actually being able to move quickly and launch something within a year. I'm kind of curious about the type of learning you're delivering. So it seems like you're using a technology solution and you're allowing the learning to be more suitable to each individual. But can you describe a little bit the skills that you've prioritized? Like, how are you actually teaching those skills right now?
Sure. So it's a combination of, we do have instructor-led training. We have web-based training. We have content providers and TED Talks and books and your resources. The other thing where I think, and Vince, we'd like to go, because I've done this in a past organization, is really start creating, I'm a big believer in immersive learning, kind of cohort learning. We are doing this within our leadership programs where you're leveraging not only those other modes of consuming, but you're also given an application or a project, and you're working in a kind of a cohort immersive learning environment. That's all enabled by the platform. We can do that social learning, that cohort learning, that immersive learning, see it capstone projects, or it could be, hey, in our IT group, and I've done this in past organizations, we have a real focus on this sort of technology, Python, AWS, that we need to focus on. Why don't we locate those folks who are most competent, they're experts in it, and let them work with smaller groups who are new, beginners, give them not only the baseline access to the code and online learning, but now let's go apply it to a project, right? A real world kind of business project overseen by an expert, right, who has deep knowledge in this. And this could possibly be one of their projects and their, their responsibilities, but they're bringing in that next level of the organization who are beginners to really apply it. That, I think, is where I see the most opportunity for real hands-on learning that drives a business need. Once again, that all can be accessed as we build that out going forward through the platform and through the pathways we're going to build.
It sounds like there's a core that you've started with, which is like a handful number of skills, but you're starting to put more rich modalities and like systems on top of it. But you started with like what is the minimal MVP you can actually put out in the market so people can actually start using it and be benefiting from it, versus developing this perfect, as you said, system that takes years to create and then you don't even get the feedback you need.
Exactly.
The second question I think I have was around, there's a lot of, in the learning world, questions on measurement and impact. And how do you tie the work that you're doing to the business results? How do you think about that question for this initiative?
One, we're building out our measurement and evaluation team on my L&D team right now because it's a gap we have. And I'm a firm believer that that's how you show your return on investment. It puts you in a space of really ideation with data as the feedback. So we're building that out right now. So in lieu of that, one of the areas we're working on is we have a 3-year measurement strategy. And year one's really around adoption and utilization, because we just need to ensure it's a positive user experience. We've got the right content, like I mentioned, that we're sourcing. And so we're really looking at adoption and really getting that reoccurring, not only going in once, but that reoccurring and beginning to measure that down to the function level so that the leaders own this. We don't own this. So your IT group, our refinery group, our finance group, we're really going to be able to show that utilization at that level so they can really drive a learning culture within their groups. And the leadership team is very supportive there. As we start moving forward, I think year 2 is where we start harvesting the skill data. What are our proficiencies levels? So one of the areas, and I haven't figured it out yet, is how do we assess proficiency level? We're an engineering company at its core, so assessments, qualifications are core of how we manage and run our business. So we need to figure out for these skills, how are we assessing your proficiency level beyond just a self-assessment or a manager assessment? So anyone out there listening, this is a gap we have. We could use some assistance. Maybe Vince, you've got some support there, but I hear that as a gap in this space, right? It's really self-assessment, and that's just the validity. It's not equitable, all the things we know about that. But we do know what we want to do is begin harvesting the data around proficiency, harvesting the data around gaps and opportunities, and then where we see strengths, leveraging that in talent mobility. So Vince, if you're sitting in one location in one area and you've got a proficiency in this set of skills, and we know there's a role over here where we're going to go external and go pay more off the market, how do we have insights to not only the gaps across the organization skills, but down to that individual level, so you can have visibility into those opportunities, but we also have visibility into that so we can start bringing forth those opportunities. So that's really phase 2. And then phase 3 for us and this is in that third year, is really starting to measure cost impact. This internal mobility. I started with this, started from our employee-based feedback test. It's they wanted career opportunity, career mobility, career development. We just want to start measuring the impact of that. Are we showing increased career mobility and career development? And then measuring that to where we were 3 years prior, where we were going out on the street and just purchasing it and buying. And there are times when you need to do that, but we know we have an opportunity where we can be measuring that more downstream or upstream business impact with dollars based on where we're creating mobility. That starts getting into, people feeling agency, people feeling proud of where they work, really seeing a career opportunity, but also measuring that impact back to the dollars, to the impact of not going external.
And by then, especially, the impact typically has a lagging indicator, right?
Exactly.
So
Yes.
it makes sense that you're starting with something that's more leading, and then by your third sort of year, you have something that's more like longer term you can start to measure.
Exactly. And that's why that assessment evaluation in step 2 is so important, because that's when you can start showing pre-post kind of growth or, obtainment, and then starting to measure where, harvest that data for those themes. So that's why that's that second kind of, it's the pre-leading before
Yeah,
you get
yeah.
to the end.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And by the way, the measurement in general, I think, of skills is a difficult thing, right? So it's not quite a solved problem overall in the industry. I think different people have different innovations they're bringing out, like similarly with ours. And I know other learning platforms are working on it too. So I suspect also in a couple of years, you'll have far more options of vendors you can partner with too.
Yeah. And I'm a big believer in piloting, Vince,
Yeah.
and partnering. In the leadership development space, I've done a lot of work where we're measuring kind of core leadership skills and being able to take those to programmatic opportunities and then measure pre, post, and then 2, 3, 5 years after through some assessments. And we really moved into that harvesting of data, but we were able to show individual impact, but then start looking across groups of people, like an executive level or a mid-level or a frontline leader. So looking for good partners in that space to pilot and really grow. We're doing work in the AI space around intake with a partner, piloting something. Once again, it goes back to this decomplexify, right? Let's pilot, let's see if it works, and then let's see if it works with our culture. Because many times I've found that cultural context is where we lose sight of it, because not everything works at every company or every culture.
Yeah. I wanted to also kind of talk about scaling this approach. It's a change management and scaling required on this. One of the challenges I see with organizations that are embarking on a skills transformation is that it doesn't really take root in the business function. It doesn't actually diffuse to actually become something that's the business really adopts, right? And you're starting to embark on this journey of rolling this out. I'm curious, first of all, what are the top 3 change management challenges you're seeing that you need to tackle today?
So I think I mentioned one already, is this isn't a learning or talent initiative. This is a business initiative, and getting the leaders in support of it. So right now, we launched last year for the first time in October called a month of learning. So we curate an entire month of growth mindset learning opportunities across the organization. And it's varied opportunities. There's networking events. We bring in external speakers. We have gamification going on. We have all sorts of things going on. But to really brand the month as an opportunity to grow and invest in yourself. Part of that is we draft and give our leaders the agency and the templates to customize it so they can send it out to their teams. And
Give
we
them
do that.
ownership and get them involved basically in the effort.
Absolutely. And this is their program. So, hey, here are the 3 programs, and we have 50, 60 things going on this month. What are the 3 things they're focused on? What do they want their team to go? And then we can do post-session talking points and discussion guides. But it's this real investment in the leaders owning this, not learning or HR. So from a change perspective, we are very intentional about that. When we've run pilots in this space, it was leader-led. As we're rolling this out, we're getting talking points to the leaders, and we've already been doing this, and they're really owning this and talking about what this is going to mean within their organization and talking about the journey we're going on. So I think that's first. The second I mentioned too was we're not just open sourcing this and saying, go. That doesn't fit our culture. We're really gating this into initially when you get on, what's your visibility? You're going to see your top 10 skills of your role. You're going to have pathways that you can, search a Netflix, and then it will start coming to you. But we're really going to focus you on these 3 enterprise skills. Then we've got a Q1, Q2, Q3, just kind of real evolution of the technology that's available to help individuals build their curated pathways for learning. It also allows us time to build out a 2-3 year roadmap to build all of this. Right now, we're going to start with 20 pathways. So I think that's an intentional change management approach we took. And then I think the third is when we're measuring and we're providing feedback, and you said that first one, that leading measure is around adoption, reoccurring, usage rate, begin measuring what's happening at the kind of business unit, what are we consuming, what are we not, tracking that and bringing that back to the leaders so they can reinforce that back to the business. And then it gives us insights on where we may need to flex and build more. But it's all through that leadership-led, business-led, not L&D or HR-led. We're here in service to it. And how they're going to communicate what they want to communicate is really, we give them templates, but it's them doing this. And what's been so amazing to see here is the amount of engagement of our executive leadership team. And I would say down to like that mid-level, that investment that they see how this is going to propel the organization forward. And then we always tie it back to that employee engagement survey we had in 23. Right, where this was the number one opportunity, employees said, career development. We've already seen a 3-point increase in 2025's engagement survey in this space, just based on us building this. And then we're, going to tie that back into that messaging.
That's really great to hear. I've seen certain organizations where the leaders and the managers are very excited and driven to do it, and then others where they are not. Yeah. And it definitely makes a huge difference. In this case, it looks like the executive leadership team at Phillips 66 are quite bought in, and it actually also feels like the engagement survey created a strong impetus for the organization to take this seriously.
Yeah, now come back in a year and we'll see how we're doing.
Yeah. Are you seeing any particular pockets as early adopters? Like, for example, certain function or certain kinds of employees are flocking to it, and you're seeing the data and you're like, that's interesting, and starting to see any patterns?
Yes. And it's interesting. One is not surprising, but this is more my background, kind of partnering with IT organizations, but the IT are heavy adopters, users. I think it goes hand in hand with just the pace at which new technology, new skills are needed within that function. Our commercial marketing side of the organization is also having heavy usage. I think a lot of that comes through the leadership and the culture they've built around continuous growth and continuous enhancement. But in that, there's also a drive, in that more marketing commercial space.
Drive revenue, which I think.
Yeah, driving revenue. So I think it's been top of line there for those folks. The other group that's interesting, Vince, so we're leveraging the same skills kind of based learning, but in our frontline employees out in our field operations, so our refineries, we have really good engagement. We've invested in ensuring we maintain our certifications at the employee level to run our plant. And that's critical to our safety. It's critical for us to keep the lights on. And we're seeing really good engagement there. It's a little more in the compliance space because it's required by us, but it's allowed us visibility to see who's certified at what level to ensure their qualification. And we're seeing really good engagement, which is the largest base of our employees. Yet it's a different dynamic. That's more because that keeps the lights on. And now we've just brought visibility and worked within those qualification certifications to ensure we're giving visibility to the organization. Those first two groups were the most unique. I think one it came from more of that culture, the types of individuals at that corporate space.
Sort of the groups that you're mentioning as early adopters aren't surprising, and it makes sense, actually. Yeah. I'm curious, you're looking at their level of engagement, and you also did mention different kinds of learning being offered, right? So there's instructor-led, there's resources you share, and things like that. Are you seeing a particular pull in certain types of modalities or engagements, landing better with folks versus not? I'm curious to hear some patterns there.
We're seeing, and we're early in this and kind of getting the insights, but I would say at a high level in that IT space, more the self-paced learning seems to be the more self-consumed. What's interesting in the commercial space is we get an index in like TED Talks, audiobooks, things that aren't more, computer-based, and having that opportunity to do it off their phones or their mobile devices. devices. But now as I think about that, that's very consistent with that employee base. I think more importantly, what we've learned in this space, Vince, is how we have to be multimodality, and we have to be building to the audience, not just to our space and where we want to go. We're a highly regulated space. So we have indexed it in the past very much in web-based training. However, not all training needs to be web-based training. And I think that your question is a great question. As we gather insights, we start seeing the nuances between the audiences and being able to then source up content. And that's what our platform does, our technology. It's really starts customizing that and personalizing that so we can source it further. But as we're going into 2026, we're starting to look at our content providers so then we can ensure we're sourcing to the audience needs. And perhaps in the past we had over-indexed in this space, but now we're seeing it grow in this space. It's just giving us some insights there.
That's interesting. And the insight that I hear from you there is, oftentimes people talk about a lot of modality in terms of what's the right modality to teach certain kinds of skills, which I think is important. In this case, what you also mentioned is modalities that they find most convenient and accessible given the nature of their work. Depending on the audience you're serving and whatever the focus you have, you're seeing traction in different ways. And I suspect as you expand your skill categories and target audiences, some people want more collaboration and peer interaction.
Yes.
Some skills will necessitate that. Others, they will want, hey, I just want to get it literally while I'm working. I don't need any training in advance. I want just-in-time access to information, and it will become more of a performance support than necessarily even training. And so it feels like you're kind of thinking about the right delivery mechanism for different skills and audiences.
Yeah. And then the other thing we're thinking about right now is like our early career programs. We have some really top-notch early career programs. We're designing and kind of piloting, deploying a couple right now. And those are very intentional programs where it is not only kind of classroom based, but it's very immersive and project based. And then you go on rotational assignments and then you come back into an opportunity to learn. Instead of daily, you're doing it monthly, then you move to quarterly, and it's a 3-year program. So I think the other thing too is not only thinking about the individual and how they want to consume it, it's also looking at people where they are in their journey.
They're like career journey, employee journey, and so on.
Exactly.
And like early careers, like more in their overall career, but sometimes if you're new to a company, then you need to build your sense of belonging quickly. Otherwise you feel isolated. And then when you're going through major transitions inside the company too, you want to connect with other peers for going through a similar experience and so on.
Yeah.
That's great. I guess one last question for you would be, what have you been most surprised by as you take on this work? And that could come from any area, like your interaction with other executives, your interactions with learners, or how the project has gone. But I'm curious if anything has really surprised you.
So I've been on this pathway for the past 3 organizations I've been on. I've actually been in this space my entire career. I really am passionate about it, and I've shared with you my background, etc. What I'm most surprised of, and it really came about just prior to COVID, and then COVID accelerated, this realization, the importance of personalizing learning that's really at the skill level. The past model of everyone goes to college or a university or a trade school shifted the demographics and the ability of leaders to quickly understand that when you laid it out for them. What surprised me was the agility of leaders and organizations to understand the importance of this. And maybe I've just been fortunate to be at kind of more forward thinking in this space. I think it helps I've worked in operations-based companies, because the reality is most people don't have college degrees. They're coming out with high school degrees. They're looking for us to invest in them, with them for careers. But one surprise I had early in my career, it seemed to go over people's heads. Like, what are you talking about? This isn't, people just, it's a machine. They come out of university, they go here. And I think there's been either a shift in technology, a shift in societal norms, but leaders are fully on board and have been on for the last decade of understanding that not everyone's in a professional workforce space. And then the companies I've worked in, the majority of the workforce isn't there. So we need to meet them where they are versus, in the past, we'd say, oh, let's take you out and send you to a technical school, for 4 weeks, 3 months, 6 months and invest. And that just wasn't smart from a business. So what surprised me was how quickly leaders understood the imperative to do this and to invest in it.
Right. Phil, it's great to hear about your effort here. And it's also really exciting to see how much executive sponsorship and just general business buy-in you're getting in around this. I'm very excited to follow how this transformation is going to play out. And hopefully we'll have more conversations to really see like what does your year 2 and year 3 look like. So
Yeah.
thanks for getting together here.
Yeah, no, thank you, Vince. I'd love to get back together and just share where we are because I'm sure what I'm saying today is not where we're going to be. So, and that's fine. That's part of the journey and ideating. But would love to stay connected and share this with others. I'm a big believer in sharing. We're all in one community. We're usually kind of going after the same things. And there are many different ways to approach them. And you've got to just manage it to the culture and the business you're in. Learning from others and then having the opportunity to share where we were successful and where we weren't. So I look forward to staying connected. Thanks, Vince.